My sister mocked my waitress job. Get a real job, she said. I revealed I am her husband's boss. I just revoked his raise. She cried at my feet. The words hung in the air, cutting through the tension at the dinner table like a knife. Emma's laughter froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. She blinked, and for a moment, I saw genuine confusion flicker across her face. The sudden shift in the atmosphere was almost palpable, like someone had flipped a switch and the entire room had gone mute. It all started as a typical family dinner. The kind we'd been having for years, where everyone gathered at my father's house, passing around dishes of food, laughing, and talking about their lives. I had braced myself for the usual comments, the subtle jabs Emma would throw my way about my job as a waitress. It had always been like this. She would make a snide remark, and I would either laugh it off or stay silent, choosing not to stir the pot. But tonight was different. Tonight, I wasn't going to stay silent. The meal had started out innocently enough. My father, with his customary deep voice, talked about work, as usual. Emma, with her perfectly styled hair and ever so casual elegance, dropped a comment about how people who worked in restaurants really didn't understand the value of corporate jobs. She went on, as she always did, about the superiority of her world, the world of high-end executives and prestigious offices, a world she loved to flaunt in front of the family. Please, she said, loud enough for everyone at the table to hear, don't ask me about her job. She earns a living by carrying plates. Let's keep our expectations reasonable. I had felt the familiar pang in my chest, but I didn't react. Not yet. I had expected this. I always did. But somehow, hearing her say it aloud, as if my life and my hard work were a joke, stung more than it ever had before. The laughter that followed her words echoed in my mind, sharp and cruel, like it was meant for me and not just some casual remark at my expense. My mother sipped her iced tea, pretending not to notice, while my father cleared his throat, his usual sign that he didn't want to get involved. I looked at Ryan, Emma's husband, sitting across from me. He looked uncomfortable, his eyes darting back and forth between me and the others. He wasn't the same as Emma. He wasn't mocking me. I wanted to tell her, to shout it out loud so that everyone could hear, to say, you have no idea who you're mocking. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I kept my smile in place, a weak one, but it was enough to hide the turmoil boiling inside me. Cloot, I muttered, trying to hold back the frustration that bubbled in my throat. Emma, clearly pleased with herself, didn't miss a beat. That's a very creative idea, she said, her voice dripping with fox sweetness. I'm just telling it like it is. While I don't have anything against serving tables, let's not kid ourselves into thinking that it's the same as working in corporate America. The words stung, but it wasn't just the words. It was the way she said it, the way she acted like her life and her job were somehow more valuable than mine, as if I was less because of what I did for a living. I had to bite my tongue. Ryan sat quietly, shifting in his chair, trying not to draw attention to himself. He nodded at me in an almost apologetic way, his face a mask of unease. He wasn't the one who had been cruel. But he knew. He knew exactly who was responsible for my discomfort. I could feel my pulse quicken, and the warmth of the room seemed to close in on me. I didn't want to be here, surrounded by their judgment. I didn't want to be the target of Emma's constant criticism, not tonight, not anymore. My heart began to pound in my chest as I weighed my options. I had always hidden my truth from them, my corporate job, the power I held in my company, everything that they had no idea about. But Emma didn't know. She didn't know who she was mocking, and maybe, just maybe, it was time she did. Ryan, my father said, turning to Emma's husband, as if the conversation was already moving on. How's that company treating you? Silver something. He didn't even bother to get the name right. Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Silver Oak, it's been good. I felt my lips twitch. Silver Oak Tech, that was my company. The company I had worked so hard for. The company I had climbed the ranks in, despite the setbacks, the doubts, the constant undermining from my own family. Emma perked up, a smug smile forming on her face as she turned to Ryan. Oh, I know you're doing great. Congratulations on your promotion. You've earned it, I'm sure. Her gaze flicked toward me, her smirk widening. I kept my eyes fixed on my plate, gripping my fork tighter. This was it. She was about to dig in, about to continue with her jabs. And I was done. Done. Don't being the butt of the joke. I took a breath, steadying myself. I knew the moment had come. If they didn't give you a promotion, they'd be completely foolish. I said, my voice steady but carrying the weight of everything I had held back for years. Ryan has an inherent ability to lead. If you only knew how many nights he spent working late, asking me for clarification on procedures, doing everything he could to make sure the company kept running smoothly. Ryan's eyes widened, but before he could speak, Emma jumped in. Tell us, how many tables did you wait on today? I gritted my teeth. But this time, I wasn't backing down. I set my fork down, locking eyes with her. Actually, I'm the one who approves raises at Silver Oak Tech. I'm the director of employee relations. Silence. Emma froze, her fork stopped midair and her smirk faltered. I just revoked his raise. I added, not raising my voice but making sure the words landed. She stared at me, mouth slightly agape, as if the reality of what I said hadn't fully hit her. Ryan's face turned a shade of red, and I could feel the weight of the moment sinking in. Emma's world was crashing down around her. For the first time, she was truly speechless. And I just sat back, letting the silence hang in the air, feeling the power of the truth wash over me. I had finally revealed who I was. The silence that followed my words was thick, almost suffocating. Emma's face went from shock to disbelief, her eyes wide and unblinking. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest, but the room around me felt oddly still, as if everything had frozen in place. The clink of silverware, the hum of the air conditioning, it all seemed distant, drowned out by the weight of what had just been said. Emma opened her mouth but nothing came out. It was as if her brain couldn't process the information fast enough. I sat back in my chair, keeping my gaze fixed on her, the faintest hint of satisfaction curling at the edges of my lips. For once, I wasn't the one silenced. For once, I wasn't the punchline of her jokes. I could feel Ryan's eyes on me. He didn't say anything, but I could tell he understood the gravity of the situation. His shoulders were tense, his jaw clenched. He knew the truth, but he wasn't about to make things worse by speaking up. He just shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable, but I didn't care. I wasn't looking for his sympathy, and certainly not Emma's. I wasn't gonna let her mock me anymore. Are you serious? Emma finally managed, her voice low, tinged with disbelief. She looked around the table as if expecting someone else to confirm what I had just said. But no one spoke. No one dared. They all looked at me, some with confusion, some with a mix of curiosity and hesitation, but no one challenged the truth I had just laid out. Yeah, Emma, I said, my voice steady. I'm serious. I'm the one who approves salary raises at Silver Oak. I've been in that position for a while now. I'm not just some waiter. I'm the one who decides if your husband gets a raise, or if he gets nothing at all. Her face turned pale, and for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. She wasn't the confident, superior sister anymore. She was just a person who had been caught off guard. The realization of what I had just revealed started to sink in. And that, in itself, felt better than any victory I could have imagined. There was a moment when everything seemed to slow down. My father cleared his throat, breaking the silence. He didn't say anything. He never did when it came to matters like this. My mother, on the other hand, stirred her iced tea as though the entire conversation was beneath her notice. It wasn't uncommon for her to remain distant, to disengage when things became uncomfortable. I wasn't surprised. Are you kidding me? Emma said again, her voice trembling this time. How could you have kept this from us? I shrugged, feeling a sense of release, like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I kept it quiet because I knew how you'd react. You've always looked down on me, Emma. Always. I didn't want to give you another reason to make me the punchline of your jokes. For a second, I thought she might argue back. That she might try to regain control of the situation, twist things in her favor, but she didn't. She just sat there, her lips pressed tight together, her eyes darting from me to Ryan, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Ryan finally spoke, his voice calm but steady. Emma, I didn't know, he said, glancing at me briefly before looking down at his plate. I honestly didn't know. I had no idea. Emma's gaze shifted to him, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. You knew. She snapped, her voice rising. You knew this whole time, and you didn't say anything. Ryan didn't respond right away. He just stared at his plate, fidgeting with his napkin. He didn't want to get caught in the crossfire, but I could see the guilt in his eyes. He knew that the situation had shifted, and there was no going back. Emma's mask had slipped, and she wasn't the untouchable, perfect sister anymore. She was just as human as the rest of us. I wasn't sure how to handle it. Ryan mumbled, clearly uncomfortable. I didn't know what to say. Emma turned back to me, her eyes narrowing. You really think this is funny, don't you? She asked, her voice now dripping with sarcasm. You think you can just come in here and humiliate me like this? I shook my head. No, I don't think it's funny. I think it's time for you to see who I really am. I'm not some joke you can poke fun at every chance you get. I've earned my place, Emma. And maybe it's time you stop treating me like I haven't. The room was tense. The family around the table exchanged looks, unsure of how to proceed. I could see the discomfort on their faces, but none of them had the courage to speak up. They knew Emma had gone too far, but they also knew that confronting her was dangerous. After all, she had always been the center of attention, the one everyone catered to. But not anymore. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't just the background character in my own life. I was stepping into the light, and for once, it wasn't about what anyone else thought of me. It was about who I had become, what I had achieved on my own terms. And Emma. She was still trying to recover from the shock. She looked down at her hands, her knuckles white from gripping the edge of the table. But she didn't say anything else. Not right away. The silence stretched out, thick and heavy. Finally, I spoke again, my voice softer this time. I'm proud of what I do, Emma. It's not about the job itself, it's about the work I put in. And I'm not going to apologize for that. She didn't respond, but her expression had softened just a little. For the first time in years, I felt like I had earned the respect I was due. The silence that followed hung in the air, thick and uncomfortable. Emma had been stunned into silence, and the rest of the family was too caught up in their own reactions to say anything. My hands were still gripping the edge of the table, and I could feel my pulse racing, the adrenaline of revealing my truth still thrumming through me. I sat back in my chair, trying to keep my composure, but my mind was buzzing. I had been carrying this secret for so long, hiding my true position, my accomplishments. All the while I had watched Emma belittle me, watched her look down on my job, and by extension me, and now, the truth was out, and I couldn't stop myself from feeling a strange sense of power. For the first time in a long time I wasn't invisible. I glanced at Ryan. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding eye contact with anyone, his gaze focused on the table. His silence spoke volumes. He knew everything, and yet, he had remained silent all this time. But I didn't want to think too much about it. I wasn't looking for sympathy from him, or from anyone else. I didn't need it. What I needed, what I had always needed, was for Emma to understand, to realize that I wasn't a joke, that my job wasn't something to laugh at. I could feel Emma's eyes on me, her gaze burning with confusion and something else, maybe a hint of anger. But she wasn't speaking. She was waiting for someone to break the silence, to smooth things over, but I wasn't going to do that. Instead, I looked her square in the eye. You think it's funny, don't you? The way you've treated me all these years. She flinched, but it was almost imperceptible, like a wave of emotion she couldn't control. Then she straightened in her chair, trying to regain some semblance of authority. I didn't mean it like that, she said, her voice faltering. I was just joking, Nathan, joking. I said, my voice low but firm. You joke about me all the time. About my job, about me. You never take me seriously. But you know what? I'm not gonna sit here and let you do it anymore. Emma opened her mouth to respond, but she was cut off by my father clearing his throat. This is a bit much, don't you think? He said, his voice low, a typical attempt to diffuse tension. He didn't look at me or Emma, his eyes focused on the dinner table, as though the confrontation wasn't happening. But it was happening. It was happening whether he acknowledged it or not. The truth had been laid bare, and it couldn't be ignored any longer. I'm not asking for your approval, Dad, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm just tired of pretending. Emma's face reddened, her earlier confidence crumbling. I never meant to make you feel like that, she said, her tone softer now, almost pleading. I've just always been, well, you know, the one who gets all the attention, the one who has it all together. I was silent for a moment, feeling a mixture of disbelief and anger. You think that makes it okay? To tear me down every chance you get? She blinked, clearly unprepared for this kind of confrontation. She had always been the one in control, always the one who made everyone laugh, who made sure she was the center of attention. I had always been in the background, the quiet one. And now, here we were, the roles were reversed. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice cracking for the first time in what felt like forever. I never thought it would be like this. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. I had imagined this moment so many times. Imagined standing up to Emma, revealing my truth, seeing her humbled. But I hadn't expected her apology to come like this. It was almost too late, wasn't it? After all the years of jokes, of mocking, this was what I got. I don't need your apology, I said softly. What I need is for you to understand. For you to realize that you've been wrong. That I'm not just some waiter. I could see the hurt in her eyes. The realization that she had truly hurt me. But there was something else there too, something I hadn't expected: regret. For the first time in years, Emma seemed to recognize her own flaws. She swallowed hard, avoiding my gaze. I don't know how to fix this, she admitted quietly. I never meant to make you feel like you were less. I didn't know what to say to that. I had spent so long avoiding this exact moment, unsure of how I would react when it came. Would I forgive her? Would I hold on to the years of pain and let it define me? I wasn't sure. I still wasn't sure. Maybe you don't have to fix it, I said slowly, feeling the weight of the conversation settling in. Maybe all you have to do is stop pretending. Stop acting like you're better than everyone else. Because you're not. The room was still again, but this time, it felt different. The awkwardness, the discomfort, it was still there, but it was tinged with something else now. Something that made me feel lighter. I could tell Emma was processing everything I had said. And for once, she wasn't trying to deflect or change the subject. She was sitting in it, sitting with the reality of what she had done. For the first time in a long time, I felt heard. And that feeling, it was everything I needed. Maybe you're right, she said after a long pause. Maybe I've been too proud. Too focused on myself to see what I've been doing to you. There was a long silence before anyone spoke again. My father, after what felt like an eternity, finally cleared his throat again. But this time his words were softer, less forced. Well, it's been an eventful dinner, he said, his tone slightly lighter than before. Maybe we should all just take a breath. I nodded, but I didn't look at anyone else. I wasn't sure what to make of the evening yet. I wasn't sure if things had truly shifted, or if Emma's apology would just fade into another empty promise. But in that moment, I had finally said what needed to be said. And for once, I didn't feel like I was hiding. The silence stretched on, and for a moment, I thought the conversation was over. But Emma wasn't finished. Her eyes were darting around, unable to land on anyone for too long. She seemed almost lost. I could see her trying to gather herself, but the weight of the truth was heavy, and she was struggling to carry it. I didn't know, she muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. I honestly didn't know. It was the first time I had ever heard her speak like that, vulnerable, unsure. For all the years she had belittled me, prided herself on being the one with it all together, she was unraveling before me, piece by piece. I leaned back in my chair, not sure how to respond. Part of me wanted to take the high road and let it go, but another part of me was too angry, too tired of being overlooked. I didn't want her apology to feel like a mere formality. I wanted her to understand the years of emotional toll her actions had taken on me. But instead I said, "You never asked Emma. You never once took the time to understand what I was doing, why I was doing it. You just assumed I was stuck, that I was less than you, 'cause I wasn't climbing some corporate ladder in a suit." She looked up at me then, really looked at me, as though seeing me for the first time. Her eyes were wide, her face pale. "I didn't know you felt like that." I could feel the words, hitting harder than I had intended. But they were out now, and I wasn't going to take them back. "Of course you didn't. You were too busy with your perfect little life, with your promotions, your status. You never stopped long enough to think about anyone else." The room felt smaller suddenly. My father shifted in his chair, clearing his throat again, but this time, it felt almost like a signal, something between the lines of his usual attempts to keep peace. He was always so quiet about these things, avoiding conflict until it was too late. "Emma," I continued, my voice steadier than I felt, "I've worked hard to get where I am. And yeah, maybe I've kept it quiet because I knew you wouldn't take me seriously. But I'm not hiding anymore. I'm not your little brother who needs your approval." The words stung as they left my mouth, but I didn't back down. I felt my pulse steadying, my chest no longer tight with fear. For the first time, I was speaking my truth, and it was freeing. There was a long pause. Emma didn't speak for what felt like ages, but then, she finally let out a shaky breath, wiping her eyes. "I didn't mean to make you feel inferior, Nathan," she said quietly, her voice thick with something I couldn't quite place. I don't know. I always wanted to be the one who had it all. I wanted you to look up to me." The vulnerability in her voice was unexpected. For the first time in years, Emma wasn't the confident sister who held all the answers. She was human, raw, and flawed in ways I had never let myself see. I could feel the anger I had been holding onto for so long beginning to loosen, but the hurt, the years of frustration still lingered. "I don't need to look up to you, Emma," I said, my voice softening. "I just need you to see me for who I am. Not for what I'm doing, not for where I'm working, but for me. For the person I've become." There was another beat of silence. Emma's gaze softened, and I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't seen in years. Guilt. She was truly remorseful. "I was wrong," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The apology, although late, hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just the words. It was the sincerity in her voice. And for a brief moment, I saw the sister I had once looked up to. The one who had always been there, even when she didn't know it. "Thank you," I said, barely above a whisper. "That means more than you know." The tension in the room seemed to ease just a little, but the weight of everything still hung there. There was so much left unsaid, so many years of unspoken emotions, but in that moment we had both said enough. We weren't going to be the same after this dinner. We couldn't be. Ryan cleared his throat, shifting in his seat, and I glanced at him. He had been quiet through most of the conversation. But I could tell he was feeling the weight of it too. He had known about my position at Silver Oak Tech for some time now, but he hadn't said a word. Not because he was trying to protect Emma, but because he was uncomfortable with the family dynamic, and didn't want to get caught in the crossfire. I didn't blame him. "It's good to finally know," Ryan said, his voice soft but genuine. I mean, I had no idea. But, I can see how much it's bothered you. I nodded, grateful for his support. It wasn't much, but it was enough. For the first time, I didn't feel completely alone in the room. I wasn't just the waiter anymore. I wasn't the brother who was always second best. I was Nathan. And that felt good. Emma sat back, her eyes still fixed on me. I guess I've got a lot to think about, she said, her voice a little more composed now. But I'm glad you told me. I wish I had known earlier. I'm sorry, Nathan. Her words, though simple, were enough. It wasn't everything I needed, but it was a start. I wasn't asking for perfection, just understanding. For once, Emma was truly seeing me. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally being heard. The rest of the dinner went on, the conversations shifting to lighter topics, but the atmosphere was different. The dynamic between us had changed. We weren't the same people who had walked into the room just an hour ago. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally at peace. The silence that followed Emma's apology hung in the air, thick and heavy. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence, it was a reflective one, as if everyone at the table was processing the shift that had just occurred. My heart was still racing, but there was a strange calmness that had settled over me. For the first time in years, I wasn't drowning in the weight of their judgment. I wasn't fighting for validation anymore. I looked around the table, at the familiar faces of my family. My father, who had always been distant, was watching me closely, his expression unreadable. My mother, who had always been the one to remain neutral, was now staring at me with an emotion I couldn't quite place. The entire dynamic felt different, like a puzzle that had been reshuffled, and no one quite knew where the pieces fit anymore. Maybe we should all take a break, my father said quietly, his voice cutting through the tension. His words weren't directed at me, but they felt like a signal away to move past the awkwardness. He wasn't one for confrontation, not ever. His method of dealing with things was always to sweep them under the rug, to avoid conflict at all costs. But this time, I didn't feel the need to hide. I was done running from the truth. Sure, I said, my voice steady, though I felt a rush of emotions I hadn't expected. I think a break would be good. I pushed my chair back and stood up, feeling the sudden weight of the room pressing on me. I had just revealed the most personal truth I had been hiding, and now I wasn't sure what to do with myself. I wasn't used to being the center of attention, but I didn't feel like I had to run from it anymore. For the first time, I felt like I was in control. As I walked toward the kitchen, I could feel Emma's eyes on me, but I didn't turn around. I needed space. I needed to breathe. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the kitchen, and I stood there for a moment, letting the cool air wash over me. I wasn't sure what I was expecting from this moment. Maybe I was expecting an apology, or maybe some grand gesture of understanding. But what I really wanted, what I needed, was for Emma to truly see me, for her to acknowledge the person I had become, not just the brother she used to mock. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling slightly. My heart was still pounding, but the adrenaline was starting to ebb. I felt lighter in a way, but also exposed. The rawness of what had just happened was still settling in, and I wasn't sure how to process it yet. I heard footsteps behind me, and I turned to see Ryan standing in the doorway. He gave me a hesitant smile, and for a moment I was grateful for his presence. He wasn't like Emma. He didn't have to speak to show that he understood. He just got it. I didn't expect that, he said, his voice soft. I chuckled, though it wasn't out of amusement. Neither did I. We stood there in silence for a moment, the tension between us slowly easing. Ryan was always the quiet one at family gatherings, the one who stayed out of the drama. He wasn't like Emma, always trying to control the conversation. He had always respected my boundaries, even when it felt like the rest of the family was ignoring them. And now, as much as I wanted to push him away, I appreciated the fact that he wasn't trying to fix things or make it better. He was just there. I'm sorry for not saying anything sooner, Ryan said, his gaze dropping to the floor. I knew what you were doing, but I didn't want to make things worse. I didn't know how to help. I shook my head. You didn't have to. I wasn't expecting anyone to help me. I'd been doing this on my own for so long that I didn't even realize how much it had been eating at me. Ryan nodded, still looking down. You didn't deserve that. The way she treated you. It wasn't right. I felt a lump form in my throat. I didn't want to break down in front of him, but the weight of everything was starting to catch up with me. I had held so much in for so long, and now that the truth was out, I wasn't sure how to handle it. I'm tired, Ryan, I whispered, more to myself than to him. I'm just so tired of pretending. He took a step closer, his voice low but full of understanding. You don't have to pretend anymore, Nathan. Not with me. The words hit me harder than I expected. I felt a wave of gratitude, but also a deep sense of vulnerability. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to hide. I didn't have to pretend to be someone I wasn't. and for the first time, I felt like I could finally let go. Ryan's presence was comforting, but also a reminder of how much I had been holding back. I had built walls around myself for so long and now, I wasn't sure what was left of me. What would happen if I kept letting people in? Would I still be the same? Or would I be something else entirely? I exhaled slowly and deeply. I'm still not sure what to do with this, I said, gesturing vaguely to the space around me. All of it, this revelation, the family. Ryan's eyes softened. It's going to take time. You don't have to figure it all out tonight. I nodded, feeling a sense of peace settle over me. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to have all the answers. I didn't need to rush. I had just made a huge step, and I was going to take my time processing it. I wasn't in a hurry anymore. The world around me had shifted, and now, it was my turn to adjust. You're right, I said quietly. I guess I'll take it one step at a time. Ryan smiled, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone in this journey. Things weren't perfect, and I knew there were still a lot of challenges ahead, but I wasn't running from them anymore. I was ready to face whatever came next. And maybe, just maybe, Emma would start seeing me for who I really was, too. After the awkwardness of the meal settled into something quieter, the evening carried on in a strange new rhythm. The tension that had been hanging over us like a dark cloud was still there, but it was different now. It wasn't oppressive anymore, it was just present. The silence that had filled the room after my revelation had transformed into something more comfortable, even if it was still thick with the weight of everything that had been said. Emma had retreated into herself, her earlier bravado gone. I could see her fidgeting with her napkin, her eyes darting around the table, as though looking for an escape. But there was nowhere to hide. She couldn't just laugh it off anymore. The facade she had carefully built around herself had cracked, and it wasn't something she could repair with a few well-placed words. I didn't want to keep digging at the wound. I wasn't interested in making her feel worse than she already did, though part of me still wanted to see her squirm. After all, she had put me through years of ridicule. But in that moment, I realized something. I didn't need her approval anymore. I didn't need anyone's approval. I was done seeking validation from a family who had never understood me, who had never seen me for who I really was. Ryan, still sitting across from me, seemed like he was in a similar place. He wasn't saying much, but I could tell he was processing everything, just like me. He wasn't used to seeing Emma in this light. He wasn't used to seeing her vulnerable. The dinner continued, the clinking of silverware, and the occasional murmur of conversation breaking the silence, but it was different now. The usual small talk that we all pretended to care about didn't matter. The weight of what had just happened hung in the air, and it felt like a turning point. As the meal wound down, I could feel Emma's eyes on me again. She wasn't mocking me now. She wasn't sneering at my job or making sarcastic remarks about my life. She was watching me closely, almost studying me. "Can we talk after dinner?" she asked, her voice quieter now, without the sharp edge that it had had earlier. I nodded, not sure what to expect but knowing that the conversation between us wasn't over. It wasn't going to be easy, and I didn't know where it would lead, but I knew it was time to face everything head on. We had to. The meal finally ended, and the usual after-dinner chatter began. People started to get up, grabbing their coats or refilling their drinks, but I stayed seated for a moment longer. I wasn't ready to move yet. The weight of what I had just revealed, of what had just changed, was still sinking in. Emma got up, hesitated for a moment, then made her way to me. Her steps were slower than usual, as though she was trying to give herself time to prepare for whatever was about to happen. I wasn't sure what she was thinking, but I wasn't going to make this easy for her. This wasn't about me forgiving her right away. It was about us both dealing with the reality of what had just happened. When she finally reached me, I looked up at her waiting. "I didn't know you were. So," she started, but then trailed off, not sure how to finish the sentence. I could tell she was struggling to find the words, and for a brief moment, I felt something close to pity for her, but that pity didn't last long. She had made her choices. She had been the one to keep me in the shadows all these years. "You didn't know?" I asked, my voice quiet but firm. "You never asked Emma. You never cared enough to find out." Her face softened, and for the first time that night, I saw something close to remorse. She didn't say anything right away, just stood there for a moment, gathering her thoughts. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter, the usual arrogance gone. "I've always been so focused on what I want," she said, almost to herself. "I never realized how much I was pushing you down. How much I was hurting you." Her words were tentative, as if she was unsure of how to proceed, but they were real. They were the first words of truth I had heard from her all evening. "I get it now," she continued, her eyes searching mine for some kind of sign. "I've always seen you as, well, as the underdog. But I see now that you're not. You've been playing your own game, and you've been winning it. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't sure what to say. The apology was there. But it wasn't enough to undo the years of mocking, of dismissiveness. But in that moment, I realized that it didn't matter anymore. I didn't need her to apologize for everything. I just needed her to see me for who I was, and I needed to stop pretending that her approval was the only thing that mattered. I appreciate that, I said finally, my voice softer. But it's not just about me. It's about all of us. We've all been holding onto these walls, pretending that things are okay, and they're not. It's time for us to be real with each other. Emma nodded slowly, her expression pensive. You're right, it's time. For the first time in a long while, I felt a shift between us. The old dynamics that had ruled our family, the subtle power struggles, the jokes that always landed at my expense, they didn't seem so important anymore. There was a new kind of understanding forming between us, something that had been missing for years. I wasn't sure where it would go from here, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was fighting a losing battle. I wasn't trying to make anyone see me. I was just being me, and that was enough. Thanks, I said quietly, for seeing me. Emma didn't reply immediately. She just gave me a small, almost tentative smile, and I knew in that moment that things between us had changed. For better or worse, we were moving forward, and that was all I could ask for. As I stood up to leave, I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. The night hadn't been perfect, but it had been real. And sometimes, that's all it takes to start rebuilding. The evening felt different now. The tension had started to lift, but there was still a sense of lingering uncertainty in the air. I had been walking around with this weight on my shoulders for so long, always feeling small, always trying to make myself invisible. But tonight, that weight had shifted, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was carrying it alone. I stood at the front door of my father's house, the cool night air brushing against my skin. The quiet was a welcome contrast to the chaos that had filled the room, only hours before. I had said everything I needed to say, and I was beginning to realize that I didn't need anyone's approval to feel good about myself. The sound of footsteps approaching behind me made me turn. Ryan was walking toward me, his hands tucked into his pockets, his expression a mix of thoughtfulness and something else I couldn't quite place. He had been quiet for most of the evening, not offering his opinion, just quietly venting. But now as he came to stand beside me, I could tell he was wrestling with his own thoughts. I'm glad you did that, he said quietly, his voice low but sincere. I nodded, not sure what to say. It wasn't easy, of course not, he replied, but it was the right thing to do. You stood your ground. It's good to see you doing that, Nathan. His words, though simple, hit me harder than I expected. I wasn't used to being told that I had done something right, especially not from someone like Ryan, who had always been quiet and reserved. The fact that he was acknowledging me in this way made me realize how much I had been hiding from myself and others. I had been so focused on what I thought I lacked, on what others thought of me, that I hadn't seen the value in what I was doing all along. I let out a breath, the weight of the evening finally catching up with me. I'm not sure I know what I'm doing yet, I said, my voice quieter now. But I know it had to happen. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. Ryan leaned against the doorframe next to me, looking up at the stars as if considering something important. You don't have to have everything figured out, Nathan. You just have to be real with yourself. The rest will fall into place. Each words resonated with me in a way I wasn't fully prepared for. They were simple, but they were the truth. I had spent so much time trying to live up to everyone else's expectations, trying to fit into a mold that wasn't mine. And for what? To gain their approval. To make them see me as successful. But tonight had shown me that it wasn't about that. It wasn't about living up to some idea of what I should be. It was about being who I truly was, without apology. We stood in silence for a moment, the only sound the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze. For a brief moment, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't just the waiter anymore. I wasn't the brother who couldn't measure up. I was Nathan, and I had earned the right to be proud of who I was. So what happens now? I asked, turning to Ryan. I mean, with Emma, with all of this. Ryan sighed, his eyes meeting mine. I think she's going to need some time to process everything. But I don't think you have to worry about her anymore. You've made yourself clear. And you've done something I don't think anyone expected. Yeah, I said with a small wry smile. Neither did I. Ryan chuckled softly, his eyes softening. But that's the point, right? You took control. You spoke up. I think you've already done more than anyone expected of you. I wasn't sure what to say to that. I wasn't used to compliments, especially not ones that felt so genuine. But hearing Ryan say it made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I had done something right. Thanks, I said finally, my voice quieter, for sticking by me. He gave a small nod, a faint smile playing at the corners of his lips. Anytime, Nathan. You don't have to do this alone. His words were simple, but they meant everything. They reminded me that, while I had been hiding and trying to do everything on my own, I wasn't alone. Not really. I had Ryan's quiet support, even if he didn't always know what to say. I had Emma's apology, even if it was late. And more importantly, I had finally started to see my own worth. The night air grew colder, but the chill didn't bother me. I stood there for a few more moments, taking in the reality of the evening. Things weren't perfect, and I knew they wouldn't be for a while, but I wasn't afraid of what came next anymore. I was ready for whatever the future held. Do you think things will ever go back to normal? I asked, half to myself. Ryan hesitated, considering. But maybe that's not what you need. Maybe it's time to move forward instead of trying to go back. His words hit me harder than I expected. Maybe he was right. Maybe it wasn't about going back to how things were before. Maybe it was about moving forward, about building something new. I didn't need to return to the past or the way things used to be. I just needed to be who I was and let everything else fall into place. Yeah, I said softly, nodding to myself. Maybe you're right. Ryan gave me a small smile before turning to walk back inside. I stood there for a moment longer, letting his words sink in. I had a lot of work to do, a lot of healing to work through, but for the first time, I wasn't rushing. I wasn't afraid to face what came next, and for the first time, I felt like I was finally living my life on my terms. When I turned and walked back inside, the weight I had been carrying for so long seemed a little lighter. Things weren't perfect, but they were real. And for now, that was enough. The next few days were a blur. Things between Emma and me were different. We didn't pick up exactly where we had left off before the dinner. It was more like we had crossed some kind of invisible line, and we were both figuring out how to move forward on this new, unfamiliar ground. We didn't have any huge, deep conversations after that night. There was no dramatic scene of forgiveness, no sudden shift in how we saw each other. But there was a shift, nonetheless. It was in the small things, like when Emma actually called me to ask about a work-related question, instead of just assuming I was still the same person she had always dismissed. It was in the way she stopped making those little jabs about my life, about my choices. Slowly, I began to see the cracks in the walls she had built around herself, the ones that kept her above it all. She was still Emma, still sarcastic, still sharp, but there was something more real about her now, something raw that I hadn't expected. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was fighting to be heard. She was listening, and that in itself felt like progress. But there were still moments when I found myself questioning everything. Would she really change? Would things between us truly be different? I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure about anything really. But I knew this. I wasn't going to wait for her to decide how I fit into her life. I had learned that much. I had to figure out who I was, independent of her, and the rest of the family. One evening, about a week after that dinner, I was sitting at my kitchen table, a glass of water in front of me, staring at my phone. I had just finished a meeting for work, and the usual sense of accomplishment that came with wrapping up a successful project wasn't there. Instead, I felt a strange emptiness, like something was missing. That was when I noticed the email sitting in my inbox, waiting for me. The subject line read, "Assistant Director position at Silver Oak." My heart skipped a beat. I clicked on the email, reading it quickly. The board of executives had reviewed my work, and I had been chosen for the position, the one I had been working toward for so long. My promotion was official. It hit me all at once. A flood of emotions: pride, disbelief, relief. I sat there for a moment, just staring at the screen, processing it. I had done it. I had made it. The weight of everything I had fought for, the long nights, the moments of doubt, the quiet years of proving myself, it had finally paid off. I leaned back in my chair, a smile creeping up my face. I wasn't sure why I had expected it to feel different. After all, I had worked hard for this. But it felt quiet, like something had finally clicked into place, and there was no more noise, no more resistance. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly, savoring the moment. It wasn't just about the job, or the promotion, it was about the journey. It was about finally feeling like I belonged, like I had earned my place in the world, without needing anyone's approval. My phone buzzed. It was a text message from Emma. I heard the news. "Congratulations, Nathan. I'm really proud of you." I stared at the message for a moment, unsure how to react. A part of me had been waiting for this. For her to acknowledge what I had achieved. But another part of me wondered if this was just another one of her fleeting gestures. Another thing that would fade into nothingness. I typed back slowly, "Thanks, Emma. That means a lot." The words felt more genuine than I expected. It wasn't just about the congratulations. It was about her seeing me, finally seeing me. Not as the waiter, not as the person she had always looked down on, but as someone who had made something of himself. Who had earned his place. Another text came through almost immediately. I'm sorry it took me so long to see that. I'm really sorry, Nathan. I didn't respond right away. I didn't need to. I had already said what I needed to say to her, what we both needed to say. The truth was, I didn't need her apology anymore. I didn't need anyone's validation. I had already found it within myself. Later that night, I sat back down at my computer to finish up some work. The sense of peace that had settled over me earlier was still there, and it felt. The promotion was a part of it, but so was the realization that I had finally taken control of my own story. As I worked, my mind wandered back to that dinner, to the way everything had shifted in the span of a few hours. It was strange to think that a single evening could change so much. But it had. And as much as I had resisted the idea of confronting my family, of facing Emma, I knew now that it had been the right choice. I wasn't looking for revenge, or some grand victory. I wasn't interested in making her feel bad, or in proving that I was better than she thought I was. I just wanted to be seen. And in the end, that's exactly what happened. The phone buzzed again. It was Ryan. Congratulations again. You've earned it, Nathan. If you ever need anything, you know where to find me. I smiled a small, genuine smile. It was simple, but it meant a lot. Ryan wasn't family, but he was someone who understood me in a way that my own family hadn't, and that was something I could hold on to. As I sat there, reflecting on everything that had happened, I realized that the real victory wasn't in the promotion, or the acknowledgement. It was in the peace I had found within myself. The quiet confidence that came from no longer needing to prove myself to anyone, not even to Emma. For the first time in a long time, I felt complete. And it was enough. The world outside my window was dark, but inside, everything had shifted. Things weren't perfect, and I knew there would be more challenges ahead. But for now, in this moment, I felt a sense of calm that I had never known before. I had finally made it, and I was finally at peace with who I was,